For over 40 years, nearly 150,000 customers and over 30,000 channel partners spanning the globe have trusted ArcServe to strengthen their data resilience, recover lost assets, and ensure business continuity. With a unified approach to data protection and recovery, world-class technical support, and the total lowest cost of ownership, ArcServe helps businesses manage, defend, and most importantly, recover their data from any situation. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Massey. I'm the America's VP of Sales for ArcServe. Thank you so much in attending this latest Beyond the Arc. We're talking about spooky IT stories, more specifically, IT stories that I find spooky that keep me up every so often as I think of them at night. Certainly, this as well as any Beyond the Arc is not any type of sales pitch. But rather, we talk about different issues and topics that are relatable to both you, the customer, and also you, the partner, uh, as far as it impacts your life, specifically in IT and data resilience. Today, as I mentioned, we're talking about spooky stories. I'm going to go ahead and just jump right on in. So, my first story. So I don't know. This goes back, probably 15 years or so, and I worked for a solution provider and I was a senior network engineer. And we also had, certainly a large team that were, senior level network folks. And then we also had really more of another group that it was really more PC and printer technicians and stuff like that. So I got a call one Friday afternoon, and this Friday was Friday, December 29th. And on Friday, December 29th of this particular year, um, this one of our PC techs had called, and he was a couple hours up north, and he was on site at one of our resort customers, and they had just done a server refresh, maybe just only 2 or 3 months earlier, and their server, while he was there, their server ended up going down and going down hard, and so he had gone ahead and contacted the vendor because we had premier support with them of the vendor of the hardware, and come to find out that there was a bad lot of memory of RAM, if you will, and this server was not going to come back up. There was no way, shape, form, or fashion that it was gonna come up until the memory was going to be needed to be replaced. Unfortunately, as I already specified the date, it was Friday, December 29th. Uh, they had next business day warranty support for the hardware, and this was a resort heading into New Year's Eve weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, right? And the part wasn't going to be able to be there until Tuesday. Obviously, this is a nightmare scenario for the leadership of this resort, right? Because this is back in the day, they only had one server. It was a small business server at the time, right? But they had their line of business app that was running on this particular server that actually contained, I mean, and they had a full capacity all weekend long, but who was going to check in, when they were checking in, what room they were in. It's how they make the keys. It's also the way that they, folks will charge to their account, and the billing and the checkout and all that type of issue. So we took a breath, right? And we caught a break or two, with this particular thing, because as I was talking to this PC tech and we were exploring really all of our options, we had actually utilized, and actually it's an ArcServe product now, but it's ArcServe Shadow Protect, and we had placed that on that machine, and we were actually running it off to. They almost looked like tapes, but they were little digital um, cartridges, right? That we were able to do that. So we actually uncovered that they had a laptop, a spare laptop that was laying around, and we ended up. I was able to walk that PC tech through the process of restoring. So we restored everything onto this laptop. So that laptop actually functioned as their server. And because it functioned as their server, then we were actually able, certainly to continue actually take backups, so then they were continuing to be protected through the weekend and allowed that resort to actually continue to do the business that they do, that they know best and what they do best, right? All the way through until, December or January 2nd, when then the new memory part came in. Then we were able to replace that, obviously, and then do another restore. So we restored everything back. So while that was certainly a nightmare scenario in the very beginning for that particular resort, all's well that ends well, so to speak, right? To be able to do that. And so since when we talk about scary IT stories and certainly ArcServe's in the data resilience space, these type of stories are really important because what they do is they end up fleshing out different areas of what we need to accomplish when we are looking at our IT systems and how we go about creating our disaster recovery plans, how we create our business continuity plans. And specifically, this was a little bit more simple, right? There were a one server operation. And so while they didn't have anything written, certainly the hats off to the solution provider, the engineers that actually had done that initial install of really thinking through about how they would end up needing to restore should they end up having to do that. Now we had to get a little creative because of where we're at with the hardware replacement, but certainly in that particular case, all's well that ends well. The second story that I have for you today is actually one. It's probably ends up being the worst 8 days of my entire life. And so at that same solution provider, at one point in time, I was promoted to be the director of hosted and managed solutions. And so from the hosting center, we hosted websites, we hosted email, we did application hosting. We also had some co-location pieces that are there. And right now you see on the screen, I've got a little photo. This is a real photo of a server rack that was in my hosting center that of this little event that happened on March 19th of 2008. So this little event happened. We had a fire, um, and when we, when I talk about this, just really kind of a 40,000 foot level, we certainly it was catastrophic inside the data center. I mean, we had everything was pretty much a total loss. But we certainly caught a few breaks. But as I look at telling the story is that this always happens whenever a disaster happens, and this disaster could be the fire like you're seeing here, or it could be something like ransomware or whatever. It never happens at the most opportune time. For me, how my week was looking, they happened on a Wednesday night. How my week was looking that week was, I was up in the middle of the night on Monday and Tuesday going into Wednesday, um, working on a SQL Server issue with one of our customers that could only be worked on after hours because otherwise it was impacting their line of business app. And so we had just gotten that resolved, way early in the morning on Wednesday. Wednesday nights was our maintenance night, so that's when I would go in and replace the tapes. And yes, we had tape. It was in the tape backup era at that point in time. And then so because I was coming back in, late to do maintenance, I left a few hours early, maybe at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and around 6:30 p.m. One of my top customers calls me on my cell phone and said, "Hey, everybody just got kicked out of our application." And I pulled up my laptop and, I'm logging in and everything. And sure enough, couldn't get there. And I said, you know what, um, Steve, here's what's probably happening. We've got a Sonnet ring, which is fiber optic that came in two different entries into the building. Maybe construction hit that fiber optic ring, and it just takes about 5 minutes or so for it to reverse. But something didn't feel right with me. So I I thought, you know what? I'm just going to hop in the car, going to go ahead and drive down there and really kind of see what I can see. So as I'm driving down there, and I'm more than halfway, but it's almost I'm in the kind of in the straight shot, so I can just see down the road, um, right at the corner of where our building was, and then my heart sunk because all of a sudden I'm seeing fire trucks arrive outside the building. So I continue to go in there. I pull into the parking lot, and I there was another key holder that had just arrived, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he said, "Oh," he goes, the fire alarms went off." So and so he's going in, and I follow it into the building, and when we walk in, there's just smoke that's just hanging down, at the top, from the top of the ceiling. And then, of course, as I'm kind of looking around, for it, couldn't really see anything, but obviously there's smoke. I thought, you know what, this is maintenance night. I should grab the tapes because this is when I would swap out the tapes. So I went over and I put my hand on the door to the data room, and it was hot. So I knew exactly where that data was. So when you look at this picture, these are some pictures of the top of the rack, and you can see, basically there were a couple racks that actually ended up burning, and melting like this, and then everything else, it was the heat and the soot, that really kind of took that away. So then starts really the whole declaration of the disaster. Now, mind you, we did have a disaster plan, but it was never tested. And there were some really good, solid reasons why it wasn't tested. I mean, mainly it was money and time and everything. And then you always also think about, well, wait a minute, why you know this probably won't happen, right? It's like everyone thinks it's not going to happen to them. In fact, as I when I talk about this story, sometimes I'll ask folks, I'll say, okay, how many of you, by raise of hands, have ever had that dream where you're falling, right? And I go ahead and raise up, and people raise their hands. I say, okay, keep your hands up. How many of you have actually seen yourself go splat, right? Most people's hands go down. And so, the takeaway here is that this is my theory that the human condition has a way of being able to really keep ourselves from embracing our own mortality, or our really heavy stuff, right? So when folks are dreaming, right, they end up, if they're falling, either they wake up and they go in, and they're in a cold sweat, they're breathing heavily and sweating and everything on that, or maybe before they hit the ground, they go into another dream, or the one that I like is when I all of a sudden have a cape and I start flying around, right? So that's kind of fun. But we have this hard time of really embracing really the bad things, the bad disasters that can happen. And I would tell you, in this particular instance, for sure, we as an as human beings think about our systems, and we don't necessarily think that it could happen. The fire is always that happens, to somebody in the next town over. Oh, that ransomware, yeah, that was due to XYZ, but that will never happen to us because we're here. Or the tornado that came through, that will never happen, right? We always have good reasons why it won't happen, but really we're all susceptible to disaster, and some disasters more than others, like for instance a ransomware attack, could very well. So we get into this, back to the story, we get into this. It took us 8 days in order to recover, right? And the funny thing was, is you might think, okay, well, maybe you couldn't get equipment. Well, we had every single piece of equipment that we needed within 24 hours. We were fortunate. We sent several vans, to drive 3 hours away to a warehouse, where we for our distributors, and basically able to pick up everything that we needed, in order to do the recovery. But we ran into certain amount of challenges in the recovery process. Mainly, we were using tape. I had to do some. We had to catalog these tapes, meaning since it was 100% loss in the data center, there was one server that contained all the information of all the tapes. we had to catalog tapes looking for that particular server so we could restore that server first, and then we would have all the information to restore everything else. That took us 2.5 days, right, to be able to do that. So the long story short, we came back up on the 8th day. And when we came back up, it was a big sigh of relief because of all the different pieces that we had encountered as we went through there. Now, our learnings from that, and again, a long time ago, I think we're generally businesses and organizations are really in a much better spot right now, mainly because of ransomware in specifically, right? Because we need to make sure that we're doing things to protect ourselves from it. But the learnings from it was it's not enough just to have a disaster plan written. In fact, if you attended our last Beyond the Arc, which was a few weeks ago, and I had Marty Myers, who is the executive vice president of customer success. Marty, you know, spoke eloquently about, hey, this is a living, breathing document, right? So it's not enough just to write it and say, okay, we're done, right? We need to make sure that we're doing things. We need to make sure that the backups work, right? We need to test the backups. We need to test restores like of databases. We need to make sure that we can recover machines, absolutely. But also we need to make sure that we can recover the whole environment, right? And that's the big DR test, at least once a year, is really important because when you do that, and when folks talk to me about testing their DR plan, testing their business continuity plan, one of the very first things that I tell them is, hey, if you fall flat on your face, that's okay in a test, right? Because then what you can do is look at why you failed, what you need to do in order to fix it, and then you go and you can rerun the test because everything you fail, and then next time when you run the test, you fail better. Not feel better, fail better. And the next time that you do it again, you fail better again. And so you're constantly improving your data resilience every time that you go through that. So that's the takeaway today. It's not enough just to have a DR plan, you have to test it. It's not enough to have a business continuity plan, you need to make sure you test it. You need to make sure that it's a big living and breathing document. Otherwise, we approach Halloween and it's not just a scary story, it's just really just a whole scary, scary, scary time. Protect what's priceless, and remember, data protection and data resilience doesn't just happen. Thank you, everyone. Have a very safe Halloween.